Now to Geraint Johnes, who's the Professor of Economics at Lancaster University. Significant relief for employers and workers across the country, but is this the right approach?
The furlough scheme has been a necessary scheme for the UK, particularly since the government itself closed down many industries as we went into lockdown. And as a result of closing down those industries, it's needed to compensate workers in those industries who otherwise would necessarily have had to lose their jobs. If you compare this kind of scheme that we have operating in many European countries, including the UK, compare that with what is happening in the United States, where the policy approach has been quite different. In the United States, we're seeing a massive increase in unemployment, and that would have been the picture in the UK had it not been for the furlough scheme. The problem is, of course, if you introduce this kind of thing, how do you wind down from it? And that is what Rishi Sunak is trying to introduce now, a mechanism for getting us out of this scheme, which is, of course, very expensive for the public purse.
Well, you said it's expensive. I mean, Lord Mervyn King, the former governor of the Bank of England, he said that furlough should stay in place until the economy has recovered. The Chancellor's saying it's not sustainable, it's too expensive. So do the economics of the scheme make sense?
Well, if we look at what has happened to output over the period since the lockdown was introduced, we've got around about 2/3 of employees are still working in one shape or another. You've got about 1/3 or 37% of people that are able to work from home. You've also got around 9 million people who are working in essential sectors, so the food production industry, agriculture, retail, essential retail, the utilities, transport and so on. But you've got about 1/3 of output in the UK that is just not there anymore. And that's a massive cut in the UK's GDP. It means that there's a massive cut also in tax revenues for the government and a huge burden for the government to pay in terms of the cost of the furlough scheme. And it's not something that is sustainable over the longer term. We've got to get production back one way or another. And the government now is talking about getting manufacturing back, getting construction back as quickly as possible. Then there's a staged return of activity in wider retail. And then last of all, of course, activities like gyms, theatres, pubs, restaurants, where people do congregate together, where there is more hazard. That is going to happen later. So furlough needs to be wound down, and it would be appropriate to wind it down sector by sector, in line with when activity is allowed to be reintroduced. The information we've got so far from Rishi Sunak is we're going to have a more flexible scheme, allowing firms to employ people part-time while they're still on furlough, but he's not inclined to go down a sector-by-sector approach, and I think that is probably a mistake.
Geraint Johnes, thank you very much.